Hello and welcome to this video on understanding the principles and processes of creating academic texts with me, Dr. Paul Breen of UCL's Academic Communication Centre. Simply put, the Academic Communication Centre helps students develop their academic language. So to begin, before we look at creating academic texts, let's think about the meaning of academic language and academic English. On the left of your screen, you can see a very famous philosopher, Socrates, asking a question in a thought bubble. What is academic English? It is not a language in the same sense as Arabic, Greek, or Mandarin, for example. Perhaps the figure of Socrates can give us a clue then as to what academic English is. Socrates was one of the ancient Greek philosophers of over 2,000 years ago who shaped so much of our educational philosophy in the Western world. Socrates believed that the best way to understand something is to ask questions about it, rather than just being given the answers. This is one of the reasons why even today, in the 21st century, in academic English, we write in a dialogic way that demonstrates knowledge and criticality. As such, regardless of your native language, academic English is the language of scholars and scholarly activity. Academic English is also a global language, and we could call it the lingua franca of Western higher education. That means it is a common language through which people in academic environments communicate with one another. However, none of us are native speakers of academic English. It is a language and a way of writing that takes time to learn. This is why both native and non-native speakers of English take classes in this at university. Although academic English is used in both speaking and writing, in this video I am going to concentrate on writing and showing you the importance of text. Text is at the heart of academic English because when you're at university you will be expected to do a lot of writing, even when preparing for presentations and seminars. And often that writing is on very specific subjects where you need to do lots of reading and research. That may sound challenging, but the good news is that the human race has had plenty of practice in this. As human beings, we have been constructing and deconstructing texts since the days of Socrates and the ancient Greek philosophers. Indeed, text has been at the heart of human communication since the age of hieroglyphics, as seen in the Rosetta Stone on the left of this slide, one of the most famous artefacts in the British Museum. It took a French linguist an incredible 20 years to crack the code of the Rosetta Stone and make sense of that language. But thankfully, academic text is not quite so challenging as decoding the Rosetta Stone. We make meaning out of texts by understanding the full picture. That's why at the core of this video, we're going to study a classic picture. That gives a sense of how texts are created and how, as readers, we make sense of them. Then, we're also going to look at how we produce texts of our own, such as the one that you can now see on the right of the screen, where I take ideas from my research into educational technology and adapt these into a newspaper article about how technologies aren't as new as we might think. Through doing this, I am telling the story of my research. I am painting a picture with words. At the heart of this video, we have a classic picture, a piece of art found in the UCL Art Museum, which I want you to look at for a few moments. This picture is the Dutch artist Rembrandt van Rijn's 17th century portrait of Abraham Franssen, apothecary and art collector. At first impression, the connection between an apothecary and academic English might not be so obvious, but actually many of the apothecary's practices link very well to the principles of academic writing and speaking. To begin with, the origins of the word itself are Greek, and it refers to a place where things are stored, such as objects, medicines, relics, and potions. Today, we would call someone in this profession a pharmacist rather than an apothecary, but the principles are still the same. And we, as academics, mix sources and readings and information and knowledge rather than medicines and potions. But just like the apothecary's work, the process of drafting a piece of academic writing is very slow and involves a lot of preparation and planning. So, as I have said, when we construct an academic text, we are a lot like the apothecary sitting at his desk. We conduct our own research and mix together different ideas and sources of information. Then we reproduce this in the form of text with the same diligence and criticality as the olden day pharmacist or apothecary, mixing his potions to find cures. In Rembrandt's picture, we get a very powerful sense of biography in the depiction of the apothecary at his desk, surrounded by objects imbued with symbolic meaning. We get a sense of his character and his daily activity. In academic writing, we also get a sense of the story at the heart of the research and the writing. To understand that better, let's look at a modern picture. This is one that was created by the young artist Jordan Breen, who is my cousin and has a huge following on Instagram. He painted this picture to tell the story of our family history. And in the same way, every academic text will give the reader a visual sense of what is going on in the writing. As a student and as a scholar, you want to share the story of your research to demonstrate your knowledge. You want to create a picture of what you have learned. And sometimes you also need to show what is unique about the way in which you have reacted to that learning. Of course, one thing to remember is that great pictures do not get painted overnight. In the same way, it takes time to construct an academic text, and at university level there's also a lot of reading and preparation before writing. Having looked at Rembrandt, now we see the words of another great Dutch artist. This is Vincent van Gogh, who once said that the most beautiful paintings are those one dreams of while smoking a pipe in one's bed. In other words, it's a lot easier to think about writing or creating something than to put those ideas into practice, to give life to ideas in the form of an academic text, and to give life to the story at the heart of your writing. The drafting and editing process is crucial in academic writing because in order to get anything done, you need to prepare thoroughly to begin with. And just as Jordan Breen had to create several drafts before he could finish the picture of the family history, when you work on constructing an academic text, when writing anything in academic language, the drafting process is as crucial as the research and the reading that you have done to give you the information to begin with. It's also important, though, to remember that there's no single model or framework for success. You have to find a style that's tailored to your own particular needs and also to the rules of your discipline or the subject that you're studying. You have to practice, you have to reflect, you have to shape and reshape your texts. You don't produce a perfect picture in one sketch, and nor do you write an essay or prepare a presentation in one sitting. There is no quick fix, and creation of text is also not a linear process. Try to think of it as a cycle. There is no quick route to producing quality work in the academic world. There is also no single model or framework for success. You have to find something that is tailored to your specific needs. But on this slide, you can see one possible model that details the academic writing process and echoes a lot of what I have been saying in this video so far. Here you can see how planning, drafting, and reflection are emphasized in the series of arrows which connect the boxes in the picture. And these are labelled as pre-writing, planning, drafting, reflection, peer and tutor review, revision, additional research or idea generation, and editing and proofreading. All of these are interconnected, and each of these stages, no matter the order that you enact them, will help you to write a text that makes sense to your reader and gives them a sense of the story at the heart of your research. You show your reader a picture through words, as I explained earlier. So now that we've got this theoretical model, what would this look like in practice if we drafted a piece of academic writing? So imagine we're going to do a first draft. How do we begin? Well, let's imagine that we're planning to write an essay entitled "How Different is Life for Artists in the Digital Age Than in Past Centuries?" The planning stage is where you think about the architecture of your essay. Right now it's a blank canvas with nothing more than a title. So, in order to get some ideas out onto the page, you need to brainstorm. You need to think about the question that you're being asked. You need to think about how you might answer that question. And you need to think about your own stance on this issue. But of course, stance is very different to personal opinion. We want academic evidence, not personal opinion in academic English. But once you have brainstormed and you've got a plan in place, you're now ready to structure things into a first draft. You have to decide at this point what sections are needed. How many sections do you need? What is each one going to say? What is the purpose of each? How will each part contribute to shaping the overall picture that you want to share with your reader? Of course, this is a very slow process. In the beginning, you might have nothing but an outline or a skeleton of what you want to create. In the same way, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, a house in the early stages of construction. That is what your first draft will look like if we use it as a conceptual metaphor. But through using the diagram that I have shown you, and through drafting and redrafting until you get things perfect, eventually you will come up with the finished product. Slowly and surely, it all comes together and will look like the now finished image on the right of your screen. Hopefully, that is. So, we're going to take a look at an example now. This is something that someone has written as a first draft in response to the question that you're trying to answer. Here you will see that it looks quite informal. It looks like something that is based on opinion rather than on academic references. We don't see any sources of information to support the ideas that are contained in the text. you will notice that there's no academic support for the closing sentence, for example. This is why I have highlighted in red the fact that references are absent in this text. But this is what a first draft will often look like. It's more like a piece of free writing, or what we also call pre-writing, work that's done before you actually come to the academic substance of your text. So, as I have reiterated, you need to revise things and review things in order to get them right. Just like the artists we have seen so far, you have to go through a process of coming up with a first draft, fixing that up, reshaping it into a second draft, and then possibly working on further drafts until you get a picture that, in terms of the written word, is as strong a piece and as clear for your audience as the work of Rembrandt or Jordan Breen several centuries later. Now, let us imagine that someone has produced a second draft after carrying out more detailed research on the topic. Here you will notice that the language has improved, the text is much more academic. Right from the outset, we can see a source who provides information or evidence. Ginsberg, 2008, is used to support the claim that the digital age is a contentious term. This means that some people might agree with using the term and others disagree. But here, what the writer is doing is that they are showing how they have accessed sources of information. And then, in the same way as Jordan Breen or Rembrandt might mix their colours into a palette to use for the painting, the writer here has used their sources of information to support their argument. This means that they have got a greater authority, and you can see how that authority continues throughout the paragraph, right up to the closing reference to my own work, Breen 2024. So, on the whole, you get a real sense of how the author's work has developed between the first draft and the second draft. In that second draft, the writer is talking with more authority and confidence because the information and ideas are now backed up with sources. It's more than just personal opinion. We're beginning to get a sense of the story that the writer is trying to tell. And over time and with practice, you too can build that authority into your writing. As I said at the beginning, nobody might have academic English as their native language, but through careful practice, you can become very fluent in using it to tell the story of your knowledge. So, thank you for listening, and on the concluding slides, you can see the references. The artwork is courtesy of Jordan Breen and the UCL Art Museum. And then, within the lesson itself, you will see references to two main articles. So, thank you, and I hope that you are now enthused about the idea of studying academic English or improving your knowledge of academic English for the future. And perhaps one day we might even have you in one of our sessions in the Academic Communication Centre in UCL.